If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you need all the information you can get about the illness and treatment options. This mesothelioma information will give you a better understanding of what the disease is, what causes it, and how it is treated. What is mesothelioma? Mesothelioma, or cancer of the mesothelium, is diagnosed in about 2,000 to 3,000 people in the United States each year, and is becoming more common over time. The mesothelium is a type of tissue formed by cells that surround the chest cavity, abdominal cavity, and heart cavity. It protects the organs of the body by producing a fluid that allows the organs to move as the lungs must do during breathing. The most common form of mesothelioma is known as pleural mesothelioma, which starts in the chest cavity. About 75% of all mesothelioma is of this type, while 10% to 20% starts in the abdomen and is known as peritoneal mesothelioma. It is rare but not unknown to have a mesothelioma start in the heart cavity. This is called pericardial mesothelioma. What causes mesothelioma? Most people who develop mesothelioma get it because of exposure to asbestos, which is a general name given to groups of minerals that can be separated into durable threads. Asbestos is resistant to heat, fire, and chemicals and does not conduct electricity, so it has been used in many construction projects and in other uses through the years. A person's risk of developing mesothelioma varies depending on how much asbestos that person has been exposed to and for how long. Many people who develop mesothelioma do so later in life, but it has also been diagnosed in younger people and even in children. Between 70% and 80% of all mesothelioma cases can be definitively traced back to asbestos exposure, and it is thought that the remainder are also asbestos caused, but without an evidence trail to prove it. Many studies have looked at the links between mesothelioma and asbestos workers. The death rate from mesothelioma in people who worked with asbestos insulation was 344 times higher than the death rate in the general population. Research indicates that within 15 years of initial exposure, about 6% of all asbestos workers over the age of 35 will die of the disease. It is estimated that about 8 million Americans have been exposed to asbestos, either through occupational hazards, picking it up from the clothing of a family member, or going to a school or work in a building that contained asbestos. It is estimated that 10% to 15% of all public schools in America have asbestos in them, as many as 733,000 buildings. Occupational exposure can come from working in the insulation, plumbing, electrical, and construction industries, as well as from working with automotive brakes, boilers, and in shipyards. People who do demolition work can also be exposed to asbestos, as well as people who live near asbestos factories or work in buildings where asbestos is present. Most people don't contract mesothelioma until 30 to 45 years after their first exposure to asbestos, though the time between exposure and diagnosis can range from 10 to 65 years. This long latency period makes diagnosis more difficult and also accounts for the continued incidence of mesothelioma even after asbestos became known as a threat. Some patients who were exposed in 1960 are only now developing the disease. However, the incubation period is not always lengthy, particularly for children. It is possible to be exposed and become ill very quickly thereafter. How does asbestos lead to mesothelioma? Asbestos is made of large numbers of tiny fibers that are easily inhaled by a person working with them. The body wants to break down and remove these foreign particles from the lungs, which causes inflammation. The tiny asbestos particles can get into the smallest and most remote parts of the lungs, and they can't be coughed out unless they stick to mucus in the air passages. They can also settle into tissue around the chest cavity, or pleura, or the stomach cavity, the peritoneum, where they cause inflammation and lead to mesothelioma. Asbestos fibers in the lungs can damage the organs by forming scar tissue, and the risk of lung cancer is 7 times greater for people who have had asbestos exposure compared to people who have not had such exposure. In fact, the 3 main causes of death for people with intense asbestos exposure are the scarring of the lungs, also known as asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma. How is mesothelioma treated? There are various factors that can impact how mesothelioma is treated, including what stage the cancer is in, the size of the tumor, and whether it could be completely removed through surgery, the amount of fluid in the chest cavity, the type and location of the mesothelioma, and the age and state of health of the patient. Depending on all these factors, treatment can range from surgery to remove the tumor and some of the surrounding tissue, radiation therapy or chemotherapy, drug therapy or removal of part of the lung. There are many different combinations of treatments that are being used as part of clinical trials, including biologic therapy, which attempts to boost the immune system to prevent reoccurrences. What are the odds of surviving mesothelioma? Mesothelioma is a very serious disease, with an average survival time of about 1 year after diagnosis. That's because it is often late in stage by the time it is diagnosed. The rate of people with mesothelioma who are still alive 5 years after diagnosis is about 10%, but the rate is steadily increasing. Most doctors say the outlook is more favorable for people who are diagnosed today. Working with a doctor who has experienced treating mesothelioma, as well as getting as much mesothelioma information as you can, will go a long way towards giving you or your loved ones the best possible prognosis. Thank you for watching. This video was produced by Asbestos.Net, a leading resource on all aspects of asbestos and mesothelioma. Our priority is to inform victims about the devastating effects of asbestos exposure, mesothelioma, asbestos cancer, asbestosis, and other asbestos-related diseases, and to advise them with a wealth of information. Individuals whose lives have been touched by mesothelioma have numerous questions and concerns. Their caregivers and family members also need accurate, reliable information. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or asbestos cancer and need more information, we invite you to visit and explore the thousands of pages of oncologist-reviewed material on Asbestos.net, to call our convenient toll-free number shown below and speak with a mesothelioma specialist, or to use the simple contact form found at Asbestos.net to request a free copy of our informative books, custom inserts, and DVD. Asbestos.net. Information and help for patients and families.